Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Abominations in Technicolor, the podcast where we review the overlooked, underrated, and critically panned films of the past in a new light. One thing we want to mention up top here is that you can always send us voice messages regarding upcoming films that we're going to review, previous films that we've already talked about by using Anchor. Anchor has this cool feature that allows you to just easily send in a voice message with your thoughts. Just hit us up at anchor.fm/abominations in Technicolor, and we'd love to hear from you guys. But not only that, joining me as always is Adam. How's it going, Adam?
Hey, it's going good. Another morning, another cup of coffee, and another abomination to sink my teeth into. So, yet again, I'm excited for another episode. Paul Verhoeven is back, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, this is what this marks the third Paul Verhoeven film that we covered on the show. So there's some more that we might get to a little later on, but yeah, we're excited to talk about RoboCop. And there's really not much we wanted to really touch on at the top of the show. There's really no really important news. Last week we talked about the Top Gun Maverick trailer and how we are extremely excited for that film. So if you haven't gotten around to it, let us know what you thought of that trailer. So we'd love to hear from you guys. But I think we can just get right into it. This is our review of RoboCop.
We've got to volunteer. The body is on the way.
Sure. Wounded joint has a cancer. Cancer is crime. Turn and roll.
As you know, we've entered into a contract with the city to run local law enforcement.
We were able to save the left arm.
What? I thought we agreed on total body prosthesis. Now lose the arm, okay?
We get the best of both worlds. On-board computer-assisted memory
And a lifetime of on-the-street law enforcement programming.
Hey, Louis, it's Super Cop.
This guy is really good.
He's not a guy, he's a machine.
What are they going to do, replace us?
Murphy, it's you.
Go get him, boy.
Thank you. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. Anything you say may be used against you.
You better back up, pal!
Your move, creep.
The future of law enforcement. RoboCop.
Thank you for your cooperation.
Beautiful. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So this is actually my birth year. You know, you always think back on the movies that came out the year you were born and whether or not they had some sort of effect on you permanently. And I would say maybe RoboCop might have. This one came out in July, very close to my birth date, July of 1987. Made $53 million domestic off of a $13 million budget. It was the 16th highest grossing film of 87. Other notable releases of 87 include Predator, Lethal Weapon, Dirty Dancing, and The Untouchables. Rotten Tomatoes has it at an 89% on the tomato meter and an 84% audience score. So a little bit lower audience score, not something we see very often in the films we do. But Matt, you mentioned that this is the third Paul Verhoeven movie we've done. If you guys want to check out episodes for Total Recall and Starship Troopers, we have those as well. I think it's been a few months, but we did them around kind of close to each other.
Yeah,
Total Recall was
stretch there.
Yeah, Total Recall from 1990 and Starship Troopers in 97. So his career spans a wide range, and we'll get into later a little bit of whether or not we see some similarities between films and just kind of talking about his style and things like that. But I couldn't help but notice, though, in turning this on, that it's another Orion Pictures production. Much like the previous episode from last week for Clifford, starring Martin Short. So, not in the same vein, not in any way similar to Clifford, but I thought that was pretty funny that we had commented on the state of Orion Pictures at the time Clifford was made, and then sure enough, the very next episode we get an Orion movie. So pretty cool. But RoboCop, I feel like, was a film that, for me at least, like growing up, it was kind of like, I don't know, it was kind of in there with like, as far as I'd hear adults talking about them, I'd probably lump it in with movies like Terminator and Jaws, and I don't know, like I feel like it made a big splash with a lot of people. So, but I never saw it. I mean, to be very candid, this was my first time watching RoboCop ever, all the way through. Yes.
Holy cow!
I think the only scene I had ever seen was when Murphy is walking down that long hallway after he has like some kind of he's plugged in and they're reading his levels or whatever, and he gets up and walks out and they're freaking out, and Lewis talks to him in the hallway. I believe that's the only scene I ever had seen as a kid, and then just never really got around to watching it all the way through since. Okay. So, but I don't know if that's the same for you, or what's your
I remember
experience?
catching it on TV occasionally. And with it being TV, though, you know, they're not going to have all the gruesome violence and we're going to get into some of this stuff throughout this episode. But I remember watching it on like TNT or USA or one of those sort of more, I don't know.
I don't feel like it's on TV channels very often, though. Like, do you find that it's on very often?
No, I haven't seen it on TV in ages, but I remember probably like the late 90s. I remember seeing it on TV. I don't know. It was probably USA or TNT, one of those more movie channel oriented networks, I guess. But it's been a while since I've watched it, and I think I enjoyed this more this viewing time than previously. And maybe it's just because I've sort of learned like what Paul Verhoeven's kind of going for, maybe like his sort of like the satire on like government and corporations and military and all that stuff. And a lot of his movies, he's really sort of incorporated that in all of them. Like look at Total Recall, where you have the corporations and military sort of kind of all in one. And Starship Troopers, there's this aspect where it's kind of like, it's a throwback to sort of those propaganda films in the 1940s during World War II. And with RoboCop, this being sort of his first like big budget like American film, I think he did his first like American film was, I don't remember what it was called, but he did one before this. But this was like his big like big blockbuster debut in the United States. And I mean, you can always distinguish a Paul Verhoeven film, I feel like. So, I don't know. I've always liked this movie, but I feel like rewatching it this most recent time, I really found myself liking it even more than before. So, RoboCop kicks ass, man.
Yeah, there's a lot to like in there. I think he's a character that you can really like. Yeah. You could call him maybe iconic, or you could at least say that like the design and the idea of him and everything is like, it is a great concept. I mean, just from a conceptual standpoint, I feel like if these guys didn't make this movie, it would have been made in some other shape or fashion. You know what I mean? Like it was bound to happen just because with the way technology works and things like that. And it's kind of like a counterpart to like I mentioned, Terminator, and that's kind of the mindset of like the mid and late 80s. A lot of people were, at least from a sci-fi standpoint, it wasn't really like super futuristic. It was like, what's going to be reasonably futuristic? You know what I mean? I think with computers and just general technology at the time, I think this movie doesn't look too far into the future, and we'll talk about some of the stuff that like doesn't really come off as futuristic as at least as much as it probably was supposed to, and some of it is dated, just the datedness of it all. But kind of talking or relating to your points on Paul Verhoeven's work and what this movie is, and talking about I guess just a general review. We do have our boys lined up.
Yes, we do.
So I think we should take a look and see what they think about it, and we'll see how it goes.
Back to 1987.
That's Peter Weller as RoboCop, the star of Buckaroo Banzai. He's dead
nice
on. The
jacket.
whole movie is dead on, both as a thriller and as an unexpected comedy. A lot of people deserve credit for this film. Foremost, I guess, is the highly regarded Dutch director Paul Verhoeven, who has previously made some highbrow films like Spetters, Soldier of Orange, and The Fourth Man. Maybe his serious-mindedness helped anchor what could have been a very silly movie into some area of convincing emotion. And Peter Weller and Nancy Allen, plus the whole crew of business executives we saw in that first scene and the bad guys in this film are just fine. RoboCop is quite violent, to be sure, but it is so well made that I think it ranks with the quality of the Mad Max movies, which were also violent and well made. In fact, I like this better than the Mad Max movies.
Well, you're lumping all the Mad Max movies together, and I like them better than you did, so I like them better than I like this. But I did like this.
This is good.
This is a fun movie, and one of the strange things about it, we saw it in that very first scene of the machine that goes out of control, is there was something intrinsically funny about any sort of a machine or even a trained animal that is only following instructions and does so in the face of logic.
Right.
That always tickles me whenever I see it. And that scene, tragic as it is for the poor guy who picks up the gun, had me howling in the theater, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed everything you liked about it, including the nice, tough relationship there with Nancy Allen, who plays a little different character this time.
Yeah.
She's convincing as a cop, and Weller overcomes the handicap of having to play half of the movie inside all of that armor.
I mean, you do have a little bit of The Fly in here with the love relationship with the guy who's half creature and half man. And a lot of technology in this film, which, I thought I've said before, I'm tired of it with Predator and Arnold Schwarzenegger, but with this director, Verhoeven, it's good.
He's a good director.
All right, so there you have it. They liked the movie, which is surprising.
Review.
Yeah. These, especially Siskel. Siskel seems to be more leaning into highbrow, and they're talking about sort of Paul Verhoeven as being this highbrow director from the Netherlands, and I've always sort of viewed Paul Verhoeven as like his movies are kind of like B movies in a way.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I've never sort of. And I haven't seen anything prior to RoboCop, so I can't speak on those. But I don't know. That's interesting to see, or I guess to hear that they sort of revere him as this highbrow director, when in my mind, I sort of view him as almost B movies with like insane amounts of like money for these blockbusters. I don't know. What do you think about their comments?
Well, initially, like drawing the comparison, especially when, like, to your point of comparing him to like a B movie director, and I think with this movie and in Starship Troopers and Total Recall, like knowing kind of what he's going for, it's not like. I think it's a little bit of both. I don't think it's like, you're not looking at like Sharknado, but at the same time, it's not going to be like Terminator 2 or, something a little bit more high end. So, it's meeting somewhere in the middle, and it has its own little like tongue in cheek kind of flavor to it. Especially when it comes to the violence and performances and things like that. But to draw the comparison to George Miller and Mad Max, those films, I think that's I guess a lucky compliment to receive, I think, for this one. I think, like, if you watch, like, the George Miller style, it's very, like, artsy. I feel like George Miller kind of even does almost like a Tarantino-esque kind of approach to the way he does his films. You know what I mean? Like, I think he's a guy that appreciates, like, the art side of it. And I don't know, I'm not like the biggest Mad Max fan, but I know in watching those, like, you could just tell by the camera angles and the choices that he makes, that he really does care about the cinematography and the quality of the process, you know what I mean? So I think it's a nice compliment to RoboCop that I wouldn't have expected, to compare, you know, the likes of RoboCop to Mad Max. So that was kind of cool. And I was surprised that they weren't a little bit more critical of the violence, because damn, did they have some things to say about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles being violent. And I mean, what? I guess it just depends. Like, you know, if it's an R rating, you know, you're watching an R-rated movie, and therefore will not be, you know, it's not for their eyes, therefore they probably won't see it, and they're probably accepting of that fact. But I really was surprised that Siskel, at least Siskel, tended to be a more of a prude, I think, as far as the violence goes. But yeah, and he didn't think that RoboCop was a cute idea either. You know, he seemed to be fine with the idea. So
yeah. Well, I also think that in this point in time, in 1987, you had movies that had come out previously. Like they mentioned, Predator had come out maybe earlier this year. But, you know, you had Terminator with James Cameron in 1984, and James Cameron went on to do Aliens. I think that came out in like 86. So you had a lot of these like machismo, like action movies. And I feel like Paul Verhoeven sort of came in and sort of mixed it all up in the 80s. You know, he brought in this different flavor to the table, and I think that a lot of people sort of dug it. And, you know, you get that like macho sort of like tone and quality to the film, but you're also getting this like satirical and comedic aspect too. So I don't know. I think it must have been interesting seeing that sort of come about in the sort of the late 80s with RoboCop. And I don't know. The guy delivered it in Total Recall. I love Basic Instinct, but I don't really consider Basic Instinct a B movie or anything. That's sort of like a noir sort of drama.
Yeah.
I really love that movie. And then Starship Troopers, you know, it is what it is. I would consider that a B movie. But right. I don't know. The guy just has his own unique voice, and I sort of really appreciate that about him as a filmmaker. And like, I can just easily distinguish one of his films from, say, like, I don't know, countless other directors out there, you know. So I wish he'd make something a little bit more recently, but maybe he has. It could just be smaller films. But I think
were you surprised by the budget on this one?
Yeah. Well, I mean, $13 million in 1987. I don't know what that would equate to nowadays, but I mean, that still had to have been small. You know what I mean? Terminator 2
seems really small for the just what we're seeing in the movie, I thought.
Right. Well, Terminator 2 came out in 1991, and I think that was like the first $100 million movie.
Yeah.
And this is almost a tenth of what that budget was. So, yeah, I mean, as far as the special effects, you know, whether it's the costume with Peter Weller as RoboCop, you know, you also have like the miniatures with some of the robots in the film. I mean, 13 million, I'm pretty sure I have to be, I don't know for sure, but they had to have been stretching their budget, like they did quite a lot for that little amount of money for a movie.
Yeah, it's a good return. I mean, anytime you can quadruple your budget, you're doing pretty well.
Right. Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about the cast of this movie because it's a good cast, or at least I think it worked for me, because I don't really feel like I knew anyone to the point where, sometimes with these older movies, it takes you out of it, or at least there's so many things on their filmography that you typecast them, or you look at them like they're another character. And this is the time of like Schwarzenegger and Stallone, and I found it refreshing to see Peter Weller as a hero in this movie, and just seeing a different face and is like letting someone else have a crack at it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I know he didn't really like do a whole lot of other things. I think like he did a lot of sci-fi stuff in film around this time, and then later did a bunch of TV work. But I don't know. There wasn't really a lot of room for him to deliver a great performance. It was more just kind of like embodying like, you are the face of RoboCop, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think the final ending sequence where you actually do see his face a little bit more with the RoboCop suit, that helped a little bit to give him some identity, or at least some room to deliver a performance. But yeah, Peter Weller, I think it's fair to assume he'll be associated with, this is his legacy probably. And
I need to add though, the studio originally wanted Arnold Schwarzenegger to be RoboCop.
No way. There you go. There you go. God, that would have been a damn good movie.
The reason why they didn't want to do that is because, Arnold Schwarzenegger's this bodybuilder guy, and if he's already like that size as a cop, they wanted somebody who has a smaller stature as a police officer, to that when they went into the costume or became RoboCop, then they were sort of this like big imposing figure. So that's a little bit of the backstory behind RoboCop, or Peter Weller and Arnold Schwarzenegger. So
yeah, by the time you get all the armor on him, he would have been a juggernaut.
Yeah.
I mean, God.
JuggerCop.
I can't fit in the armor. It's not going on. Stretch it out.
That's good.
Call James Cameron. I'm out of here. Oh man. Anyways, Nancy Allen as Lewis. Is she Officer Lewis, or I forget? Yeah. Funny thing about Nancy Allen is the following year she played opposite Tom Skerritt in Poltergeist 3. I noticed from her filmography, and I was always very fond of the
Chicago
Poltergeist
one?
Movies. Yeah,
takes place in the high rise.
Chicago, but yeah, there's a high rise, condo or apartment that they stay in. A lot of mirrors in the building and things like that. They play off of that quite a bit in the movie. But Poltergeist 3, not that it's probably the worst of the three, but notable other appearance that I remember that I've seen. And then you also have Kurtwood Smith in there as Clarence, who we all know and love for being Red Foreman on That 70s Show. And then I'm a big fan of any Robin Williams film. So I remembered Kurtwood Smith being in Dead Poets Society as the father of Neil Perry. And that's a sad movie. We don't have to get into that. Right. But great performance in that movie from him. I mean, he always brings it. He's got that guy. He's been around for a long time, and I never knew he was in this movie, so I was like, oh man, Red Foreman's in this movie, no way. And he is pretty good. He's menacing.
Yeah.
He's he's a lot better in this than the other guy was chasing around Arnold in Total Recall. Like, I can't remember who that actor
Michael
was.
Ironside?
Oh yeah, Michael Ironside. He was constantly chasing around Arnold in Total Recall, and I thought Red in this one was much better as a villain, like just different flavors that he was bringing to the table. I thought it was nice.
Yeah.
Especially when they got those big guns out.
Oh yeah, that was a great scene. I recognized this guy, but I couldn't pinpoint it in my brain. Like, where do I know this guy from?
Yeah.
And I wasn't a big watcher of that 70s show, but I mean, it was like always on TV.
Yeah.
So I would catch it here and there, but it's not like I watched every episode. But yeah, I just couldn't pinpoint it. Like, where do I know this guy from? And he does look a little bit different. You know, he has more of a brown hair in this film, or that 70s show. It's like a gray.
Right.
And,
glasses.
He just looked different, and he did not act at all the way he does on that 70s show. So it's like he morphed into this like funny middle-aged man in that 70s show, and it was surprising to see this guy sort of portraying this character that like I guess I had seen him, you know, growing up, having seen this movie a couple of times, but I never really realized that it was Red Foreman. So that's kind of a epiphany I had while watching this movie.
Yeah. And then last but surely not least, the cream of the crop, the late and great Miguel Ferrer.
Yes.
As
Rest
the
in
OCP
peace.
exec Morton. And the primary reason why I treasure Miguel is because of his wonderful performance as the masterfully villainous Quigley in the 1994 film Blank Check.
I knew you were going to bring that up. I knew it.
I love it.
Macintosh.
Yeah. Yeah, Macintosh. Who is he? Juice. Yeah, Juice in there too. That guy's good too. I need to look up his name.
Yeah.
Yeah, for those of you who have not seen Blank Check,
great film.
Finish this podcast or YouTube video first, but then immediately postpone any other scheduled events that you have for the day and find your nearest copy of Blank Check. Watch it and just try not to have the time of your life, because Blank Check is a real treat.
Was that
Blank Check is like having like your favorite dessert before dinner or something like that. It's just,
well, it's the ultimate kid movie.
It's like, why don't I watch this every day? You know?
Well, I mean, not to get too much off the rails here, but I mean, what would you do if you were like 9 years old and you somehow came across $1 million? What would you do with all that money? So it is a fantastic time. We highly recommend Blank Check. So check it out and let us know what you think.
So something that's not present in Blank Check is an abundance of violence, and Siskel and Ebert definitely touched on it, but you know, we wanted to kind of just highlight it and you know, dive deep a little bit as far as what they're trying to accomplish with it. And I think that's the important piece to understand about this movie in order to enjoy it. So we do have a clip, and I think it's just going to give us a little bit of meat to chew on here. So let's check this out.
You now have 15 seconds to comply. You are in direct violation of Penal Code 113, Section 9.
All of these tests in movies go wrong.
Yep.
Oh, God.
Say goodnight
my
to the bad
gosh.
guy.
Yeah, the way this movie portrays violence, and this is like the first scene in the movie, not the first scene, but like the first violent set piece in the film. And basically, to sort of contextualize this scene, like what happens before it, is that you have one of the gentlemen, what was his name again? What was his name?
Dick Jones?
Yeah, Dick Jones is doing this presentation, and basically this corporation, OCP, has sort of taken over law enforcement in Detroit. And they're trying to prevent crime, and they're creating new technology to sort of help with that. And he's developed this sort of robot police force machine that we saw just execute this board member in front of everybody. And they're trying to use technology to sort of, I don't know, help with law enforcement. I don't know if that's to save like cost on like labor with police officers or what, but yeah, they're trying to do this demonstration, and they have the board member pick up like a gun. I don't know whether it's loaded or not, but they're just trying to do this demonstration, and technology goes haywire, and it ends up executing this guy. And Miguel, how do you say his last name?
I usually just say Ferrer.
He sort of steps in after all this happens, and he introduces the RoboCop program. So that's where the movie sort of goes off from here. And Dick Jones, is it?
Yeah. Yeah, Dick.
He gets really sour, and that sort of puts him on the villainous path. So that sort of sets up the rest of the movie. So
Yeah, Dick... In this not working out, really botches the presentation. And the higher up, like the president or
CEO,
I forget, they call him the old man, I think, right?
Yep.
They're essentially presenting to him, and by botching this performance, it opens it up for Miguel Morton is his name, to step in with his idea of presenting him with RoboCop, which eventually becomes RoboCop. So, and there, sets in motion the competition between the two, kind of create the conflict in this movie. It's Dick Jones that hires. What's his name? Clarence. Yeah, Clarence creates a lot of the violence in the movie and trying to hunt down RoboCop and everything, and doing what he's doing as well.
Even the first mission we see Murphy go on, he runs into Clarence and his gang members, and they pretty much execute Murphy. Blowing off his hand and shooting him in the chest with shotguns, and they execute the guy in pretty much a similar way as that board member. He just gets obliterated by gunshots.
And I'm glad you mentioned it, because I wanted to bring back another segment that we've done on the show previously. It's the Parent's Guide to RoboCop, the segment that we all know and love. So related to the scene where Murphy gets absolutely blown away, much like our unfortunate friend in the boardroom, there's a lengthy description here on the violence and gore section of the Parent's Guide to RoboCop. So it starts off by saying, A man's hand is blown off at close range with a shotgun. He is shown holding the bloody stump while blood pours from the wound. The arm of that same hand is then blown off. This is all done for the amusement of the men shooting him. The band of men finally proceed to fire on him continuously, which with shotguns and machine guns, laughing sadistically. Even though the man is shot so extensively, his body is protected with a Kevlar suit, which shield his body from the bullets, so he only feels the force of the bullets. Because of the Kevlar suit, he survives this attack, and one of the men finishes him with a single shot to the head. The back of his skull is visibly blown out. There's a shot of the aftermath of the attack showing his body surrounded by blood and gore. An incredibly brutal, graphic, and disturbing scene. Even with the Kevlar suit, this can be quite painful to watch. A lot of Kevlar going on here.
Yeah. Makes me feel safer
Kevlar.
Makes me feel safer about bringing my child to the movie theater.
Maybe you should dress your child in Kevlar to go to see this movie. Probably, I'm thinking maybe that's the way to go. That'd probably be a good idea. You know, any R-rated film, just be ready for Kevlar. The Parent's Guide is oftentimes something. It helps me at least like appreciate some of the over-the-top stuff. Like, It's like you watch a movie like Starship Troopers or, you know, any Paul Verhoeven movie, basically. It's like, all right, this is happening. Like, that was a little bit, you know, I have this, like, bad taste in my mouth or whatever after watching a scene. It's like, but you know what? I bet you it would cheer me up if I read The Parent's Guide. Because seeing it in text, for whatever reason, adds a little comedy. Yeah. I don't know why that is, but it always does.
Well, I mean, later on in the film, I think in the final act, we were talking about violence. Probably the most gruesome part of the entire movie is when one of Clarence's gang members is driving a vehicle and drives it right into like a toxic waste container.
Oh God, yes.
And he just gets like doused in this like toxic waste, and he's all deformed. And I should have got the clip for this, but you know, he's mumbling around the construction site or wherever this is taking place, and like some steel mill maybe or whatever. But you know, he's just mumbling around, and Clarence is getting chased by.
He's going, help me.
He's getting chased by. Or no, Clarence is getting chased by Officer Lewis, and he's like looking behind him. And meanwhile, that gang member's mumbling around like the alleyway or whatever, and Clarence just obliterates the guy, and it's like a freaking water balloon explodes. You know, the head goes rolling over the hood and the top of the car, and it's just like
a shot from the inside of the car too, and it's
it's disgusting.
It's like water balloons hit the windshield. It's like just liquid, you know?
Right? Yeah, it's just washing over the windshield.
I think it's funny to look at that shot of him driving into the toxic waste tank and thinking it's like the R-rated version of Biff driving into the manure truck.
Right.
It's like, this is Paul Verhoeven's version of Biff. Like this guy, this like you know, just one of these thugs like driving in and getting basically melted by toxic waste.
Well, and the funny thing about it is that the movie never like lingers on that. It happens and then it just cuts to the next scene. You know, it's just kind of like, I don't know. It's like he doesn't think that it's a big deal, really. Like Paul Verhoeven, I don't know. It's weird. It's definitely weird.
Yeah, I think it's a missed opportunity. They could have had that tank say Axis Chemical on it, and then the guy comes out of the car and he's the Joker and he just laughs and scurries off, you know. Then you'd have a spin-off. You'd have RoboCop, Batman together.
Right.
They dropped the ball.
Yeah. Well, it's just
could have been an origin story, man.
I wanted like a reaction from Clarence, you know, like it's sort of happening, and then, you know, he just sort of drives off the edge of this this bank, and then, you know, flips his car.
He was probably just
a
lighting his cigarette or something, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yep. But man, oh man, the violence in this film, and I guess for all Paul Verhoeven films, man, they do not hold back. And maybe we can, I guess let's get into some, after the break, let's take a quick break here, and we'll get into some of the similarities between the rest of Paul Verhoeven's films. So stay tuned, we'll be right back. Hey Abominators, do you want to share your feedback, thoughts, and opinions, or just tell us what you're thinking? Well then send us a voice message. Voice messages are an easy way for you to send us audio that might be featured on an upcoming episode of Abominations in Technicolor. And with the latest feature from Anchor, the platform we use to make this very here podcast, it's quite easy. Just call and you have a minute to get the message in. Either use the direct link in the episode description or call in using the Anchor app. We can't wait to hear from you. And now on to the show.
All right, so I couldn't help but notice in this movie, and it's because we've done 2 other episodes on Paul Verhoeven's films, but he likes to use these video screens or commercials, or there's always like other types of media like plugged into his films, and I think that's cool. I think it's a sign of the times, like of the 80s and entertainment, and you know, plugging in different you know, uses a commercial to, in both Total Recall and in RoboCop, to advertise kind of different technologies that are out there, and some of them tie into motivations for the character, like in Total Recall, kind of the, you know, living your fantasy kind of thing. An opportunity to do that. And in RoboCop, it's more in line with, like, I don't know. I think that's some of it's more setting the tone for technology. One of them was a game like Battleship, but it was like Nukem, was it?
Right. Yeah.
Is it called Nukem?
Yeah.
And I think it had some stuff in there with the Middle East or something like that, if I recall. But, and I think it might be touching on just kind of like, you know, over, you know, we're kind of being desensitized by violence to a certain extent. Maybe he's acknowledging that as we become more technologically advanced and you know, I think we're losing our sensitivity to the violence. So you got a game like Nukem, like it's over the top, and I guess it's just depending on how you read into it. Like, I don't know Paul Verhoeven well enough to know if he's trying to be political or not, but nonetheless, I guess just what we want to talk about is more like his uses of these different types of techniques in his filmmaking, these panning shots, screens that pop up in the corners, or whether it be a newscast or whatever. Like, you see that in Starship Troopers, Total Recall, and RoboCop, and it just feels like it's his movie.
Yeah,
it's like a signature, you know.
Well, and what I like about all of that stuff, whether it's his commercial, and, you know, it's maybe a futuristic take on commercialism, you know, or corporations being all corporation-y, is that in all the newscast stuff, the way he uses it helps with his world building, you know, whether it's just
right.
It's he's getting all this information across in like a fun or entertaining way, rather than just having a scene where people are, you know, walking down a hallway drinking coffee and sort of explaining it. You know, he introduces you to this sort of like near futuristic world, that does have some more. I feel like RoboCop is a lot more grounded than I would say like Total Recall or Starship Troopers. Like this is supposed to maybe take place in, I don't know, 20 years in the future, maybe. I don't know. I don't recall if it ever says a date. I don't remember. But
and it probably doesn't really matter either. You know what I mean? I think because it is grounded, exactly to your point. Like it's, to us, it probably doesn't feel very futuristic just because you see, Clarence use a disc to play a video. You see when they go into the home, there's some like based monitors, like these like pillars with monitors on them. They look very dated. It's like something maybe the realtors use to help sell the house, to give people tours of the homes as they're looking to buy them or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Do you remember that? The pillars, or I guess you'd call them consoles or kiosks or whatever. But yeah, the cars to me didn't seem too futuristic. So I would agree. Like if you're gonna look at it, especially today, it wouldn't seem too far into the future. It all seems very practical from from 1987. You're probably only looking at like maybe the early 2000s or something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
And if Back to the Future 2 had flying cars and it was 2015, then you definitely have to be somewhere between, 1990 and 2010 or 2005, something like that.
Right. Yeah, it's with all movies that take place in the future, we always get it wrong. There's never really a movie that has taken place in the future that turns out to be accurate in a way, like look at a movie like Blade Runner, which came out in 81 or 82, and it took place in, I think, 2019 or 2017. But I don't know. They always seem to get it wrong. And, like Back to the Future 2, we just experienced 2015 4 years ago. So, every time we sort of reach a movie's like the time it takes place in the future, when we, finally come upon that, it always seems to be wrong. Like it's so hard to sort of predict what the future is actually going to look like. But I feel like RoboCop, it gets that gritty aspect about Detroit. I don't feel like it captured Detroit too accurately. Like I never felt like I was actually in Detroit. Yeah. So
I don't feel like
that's one thing about it.
They didn't really highlight Detroit very much to the point where you knew that you were there. You know what I mean? I think a lot of other movies really like make you feel it, but and I think it's because they wanted to probably keep you on track as far as the plot and characters go, and you want to care about Murphy and his story and everything, and there's a lot going on already. So but yeah, I feel like maybe with a bigger budget they could have really made you know that you were in Detroit in the way that like Michael Bay tends to do that with his films.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's a hard thing. I can't imagine having to, write a movie that takes place in the future. Like I don't have the, I don't know. I guess I don't have the sensibility to sort of, I mean, I could try and write something that took place in the future, but I guess I'm just not creative enough or have enough scientific knowledge about what things could look like. But I don't know. I think RoboCop does a pretty good job, and I don't know. It's a fun sort of, I don't know. As far as like a police movie, I feel like it just has some really good aspects about it, whether it's the violence and the satirical sort of sensibility. I don't know. it's a good time to me.
Yeah. How would you rank your Paul Verhoeven films, at least between the three, now that we've covered Total Recall, Starship Troopers, and RoboCop? Give me your list.
Well, I would say, okay, out of the three that we've covered,
yeah.
Let's see.
Unless you want to throw, what was it, Showgirls or... I think he did. It was Showgirls or Striptease, one of the two. He did one of those movies, I think.
Did
shortly after.
Did he do Showgirls?
I'm pretty sure he did. Let me look at it again.
I didn't think he did that, but maybe he did.
He did Showgirls, man.
Really?
Edited television version.
Wow.
95. Right before Starship Troopers.
Really? With the girl from Saved by the Bell?
Yeah. Yeah, directed by Paul Verhoeven, man.
Wow.
Yep,
I
Elizabeth
did not
Berkley
think he did that.
as Nomi Malone. And then you have the multi-talented Kyle MacLachlan as Zach Carey.
Jeez.
That is not a good movie.
No, it's not.
That's a pretty awful film.
It's been a while since I've seen
4.7
that.
out of 10 stars on IMDb.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, okay, if I had to rank these suckers, it looks like you got some video quality issues going here, but we'll just have to deal with it.
That's okay. Yeah.
So if I'm going to rank these things, I'm going to put Starship Troopers first. And I know when we reviewed that, you were not too hot on that flick.
Yeah.
After that, I'll put Total Recall, and then I'll put RoboCop. And all three of these, I like them. I like them quite a bit. I wouldn't say I love these movies, but I think that they each are sort of unique and they have some pretty awesome things about them. But I feel like with I don't know, Starship Troopers to me is just it's one of the most fun movies. Like every time I watch it, and I know it's like the cheesiest one that he's made, but just all the propaganda stuff I love about it. The it has the violence. You have Rico. You got Jake Busey in there looking like Guile from Street Fighter.
I forgot about Jake Busey. Oh.
Yeah,
you're gonna change my mind. You're persuading me.
With Total Recall. I feel like Arnold Schwarzenegger really elevates that movie and makes it a blast to watch. So that's where I sort of put that one. And then RoboCop, I really enjoyed watching this movie, but I feel like there wasn't a cast member that really just pushed it over for me. If there was somebody that could have, I don't know, the lead of this movie, there wasn't really one person to sort of like root for. You know what I mean? Like, I felt like they could have done a little bit better job with Murphy sort of getting kind of an emotional attachment to the guy. They did a little bit of that with his family and bringing that stuff into the mix, but just setting that character up and trying to build that emotional attachment to the character, I felt like they could have did a little bit better job. And then the character of Officer Lewis, I felt like she wasn't portrayed very well. So that's sort of the only issues I have with RoboCop. So that's kind of why I placed that one third.
Yeah, I think I would probably go Total Recall, then Starship Troopers, then RoboCop, then Showgirls.
Okay. All right.
So, yeah, Total Recall, it's a cool movie. I mean, I think I don't know. I love just that you've got Arnold in there in a sci-fi kind of role, something a little different. It's a wild ride. I mean, that movie goes and goes, and you go to a lot of different places in that movie, and it kind of takes you on this wild ride. And Starship Troopers, I think that one is more tongue in cheek. It's more like you're kind of needing to know what you're in for and that kind of thing. But just when I saw that movie initially, like I'm clinging to a lot of nostalgia with that movie and the bugs and the, like you said, kind of the propaganda piece of it. It is a lot of fun. Like it's a pretty cool movie. It's not like anything else, I feel like. And then RoboCop, yeah. I feel like it was just kind of like it needed to have a menacing villain or something. Or I feel like if the actor that played Dick Jones was someone more, just a little bit more well known, or could bring a little bit more intensity or more, someone more intimidating or something like that, I feel like it really would have added to it. And that was a great point about Peter Weller with the backstory. Like they flashed back to it. They could have really built that in the beginning. And I feel like we got a lot of stuff in the middle of him, like happening upon a lot of these criminals. Like some of the scenes, like, can we just talk about some of the scenes where RoboCop happens upon some crime and or he comes in, like the guy that's robbing the gas station, and then from like 40 feet away is pumping free gas. Like, I could shoot you for you,
yes.
man. You know, like,
yeah,
that scene is just so stupid. And then you got the scene with the guys that are like trying to rape the girl.
Yeah.
And he's got a knife in there, just like, it says like 415 in progress. And he's like, RoboCop comes up and they're just basically like chasing her, like, they're just like, oh, they're all yelling and she's screaming and they're yelling at her, like following her and stuff. And then RoboCop ends up like shooting her through the legs and shooting him right in the crotch, which is pretty awesome of a scene. But some of that stuff is just really bizarre and maybe lacked some of the quality that we even got with, is even maybe a little subpar as far as the quality of entertainment compared to Total Recall and Starship Troopers. So that is why I would place that one under those two and above Showgirls.
All right. Well, that's a pretty good list and some pretty good reasoning behind that.
Yep.
But is there anything else you want to add about RoboCop? I feel like we've covered quite a bit. I mean, this movie, it's sort of, to me, and it's in the Mount Rushmore of 80s sci-fi movies. Well, maybe not. Right. I feel like the 80s was a time where they really sort of dove deep into science fiction.
Would you have on the Mount Rushmore? Would you have his helmet on or off?
On.
You'd have it on. I would as well. I think it's more iconic with it on. That's your cover of the VHS tape is going to have a nice glistening helmet on it.
I thought he looked pretty weird with the helmet off, and it's kind of scary. I remember sort of being a little put off by that as a kid, seeing him with the helmet off.
I thought it was really cool, though, how they were able to make it look like his skin was wrapped over the top of the machine parts of his, situation. Like, somehow with the makeup, they were able to make it look like the skin was overlapping over
Right.
the metal and everything, which that was pretty cool.
Yeah, the kind of like makeup job, the sort of costume and special effects, they're really well done. I mean, that must have contributed quite a bit to the budget of this film. I'm not sure if it won any like awards for like costume design, but you'd think that it would be somewhere up there as far as, you know, being a contender, right? I mean,
yeah. I think they did a great job with RoboCop stuff. The CG or the models or whatever they used for the other, what is it? Was it like a S209 or I forget what the other robot police officer machine was. Do you remember the name? I forget the name. It'd be Dick Jones's creation that they botch at the beginning. I don't remember what that one was called, but I loved the scene where RoboCop goes to the corporate office building and Dick Jones is like, yeah, we've got a bunch of these, you know, he's looking to take over because I think he thinks that he had Morton killed. He thinks he's in the clear. And he's got that machine robot, whatever, down at the front door of the corporate office. And RoboCop just comes up and he's got one of Clarence's big guns, right? Doesn't he have one of those? And he just takes out, like, just blows that machine up from the top half of him and just he's only got legs left. I thought that was pretty sweet. It's like, you know, RoboCop at no point in this movie do you really feel like he's ever like in danger of, you know, we're never losing RoboCop. He doesn't face any like formidable opponent or anything like that.
Yeah, not
in
really.
This movie, which makes him pretty badass. You almost have like this like, you know, puts you in the same state of mind as like John Wick, where you can just like sit back and relax and just enjoy the explosions and the shooting and everything and just bask in it. You know, you don't have to worry about, is our hero gonna perish, you know?
Right.
So.
Yep. Yeah. And then after that, he strolled up to the boardroom and, you know,
tossed him out the window.
Yeah. Yep. There goes Dick Jones.
Yeah.
So, but I think that can be it for our RoboCop episode. Yeah. We had a great time watching this movie. And, you know, let us know your thoughts and opinions, whether it's down below in the YouTube comment section or send us a voicemail on Anchor, just anchor.fm/abominations pod. So, Adam, what do we have on the schedule for next week?
So next week, as we've discussed previously, I don't recall what episode it was, but we do have coming soon a kind of reboot series on Netflix for The Dark Crystal. So we thought it'd be only appropriate to re-experience 1982's The Dark Crystal. And, you know, in all its Jim Henson glory, we'll bring that back for you guys and for ourselves and enjoy once again. So I'm really looking forward to that one. It makes me, I think it's going to be like, you know, it's going to be tough not to want to do some other like Labyrinth and some movies like that after this. Or maybe it won't. Maybe it'll make me want to take a break from puppetry for a while. We'll see.
Right.
I don't know. We did Howard the Duck, and we're still willing to do The Dark Crystal. So
and Chucky.
We'll see. And Chucky. That's right.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's going to be a fun time. We're really looking forward to it. And, you know, this Netflix series, it has a lot of positivity surrounding it. Mark Hamill was just at Comic-Con for it. So it's looking to be quite good. But for Adam and myself, we'll see you next week.